Before we begin, thank you very much to Jeremiah L. for joining the Patreon campaign. Very appreciated. Thank you so much for the support. Jeremiah did not have their name listed that way on Patreon, but it's a little bit weird. It's spelled a little bit weird, so just to be sure, that's the closest approximation I can get to, so I hope that's okay. Thank you so much. One more reminder before we hit the end of the month. We are almost at the first, which means it's time for the next Q&A video. Please visit the previous one if you want to leave a question for me to answer. Probably going to be doing it on Saturday since it doesn't clash with any other videos. So be on the lookout. If your question is in the comments section come Friday night, it will get answered. I try to answer everyone in the Q&As, so give it a shot if you have anything to ask. And I've got an itchy eye today. This is going to go great. All right, so let's discuss here. I just got in what you see on screen right now. This is the current reissue Hound from the Retro line. And I've spoken at length in the past about how much I love the idea behind this Retro line to actually take the G1 molds and repaint them to be more cartoon accurate. As you can see, there is my Hound. I have him. It's cool not only because it does away with all the stuff that can wear out easily over time, such as the chrome and the stickers, but it's also the closest the original toys are going to get to looking like they did on the cartoon. So it's kind of a landmark, kind of like a landmark thing for Transformers to do. Unfortunately, it looks like they've hit upon this idea at a pretty unfortunate time for Transformer reissues. Now, for starters, we have to acknowledge something. Hound is being released in the current Retro line, which is 86 movie themed. You will remember Hound from such scenes as watching Optimus Prime race off to his final battle without actually following him or joining in the fight. Hound did essentially nothing. In his appearance in the movie. He did not have any lines, and yet here he is in a movie-based reissue toy line. And that kind of raises a few questions. I mean, surely there's characters with higher priority than Hound. Hound is fine. He's a classic 84 character, but he certainly isn't known for being in the movie. So, what gives? What happened here? And more importantly, do we have an explanation for why? So, in a recent little interview that the designers at Hasbro did, yes, we actually did get a reason for this. And there's a few other things to mention here, but the big thing about this particular part is they admitted that they are working with what they have for the Retro line, but not all molds available, and even if some were recreated market-wise, it might not be worth it in the end. So this is just an abbreviation. This isn't like the entirety of the line that they gave. It's not the full answer, but it's enough for us to actually kind of speculate on. So we've known in the past that there's a lot of problems when it comes to reissuing G1 toys. Not only cost, but availability is a big thing. And we know from what Hasbro has said in the past, it's not as simple as just recasting the molds and then releasing them. For starters, many of the original molds do not exist anymore. They're either lost or completely destroyed. I'll give you a list of a few we know about later on, and we'll kind of figure out from there what is still around and what is not. But we also know that the cost of casting a brand new figure out of a mold, or casting a brand new mold, is what I mean to say, is extraordinary. We already know that the mold making process in toys is already the most expensive process there is. But there is something about G1 toys and recreating previous molds that is actually more expensive, and we're never exactly sure why that was. It's a little bit of a weird situation, but that's what we've commonly heard from Hasbro. Now, there's a few molds that we know, or we can easily speculate, have been completely recast, and we kind of know why. Obviously, the original Optimus Prime has been recast multiple times, not only because we can see the fixes in between the different reissues, but I believe Hasbro actually did state that this is a fresh casting of the mold for the previous Walmart reissue line. I could be mistaken on that. Important to note that there is speculation the trailer is missing because that mold is lost, so all they were really concerned about was getting the cab out. A little weird, but that's just a speculation thing. Another mold that we know was recast at some point, or at least I can remember hearing reports that it was confirmed to be recast, was Soundwave. And again, we're talking about one of the most popular G1 toys there ever was. So the idea that Hasbro and Takara would go in on the cost of recreating that mold, that's not too shocking. So that's pretty well expected. And again, it's one where we can see like there are subtle mold changes between different reissues, so we can kind of tell when they are recast or when they are based on a previous version. Other ones we know were brand new casts, and this is the strange one. The Japanese Dino cassettes that never came out during the original G1 run. These were packed in with Studio Series collections as part of the Bumblebee movie toy line, which is a little bit odd to say the least. So there's these two, which you can see one is recast, one's in orange. That's the Brano. You'll excuse me if I can never remember their names. But they did a weird thing where one pack had one original and one repaint, and then flipped that for the other reissue. And then there's a reissue set of cassettes that is 2 of the other Dino molds and 1 Rumble. Or Frenzy, since it's one of the toys, I should say. The blue one. Have fun with that one in the comment section. So that's a super weird one to actually rerun, but I guess, hey, there's collector's appeal to having like the very first US run of those toys. There's others we can kind of speculate on. Everyone pretty much assumes that, Starscream has been recast multiple times at this point, because of course it's the Seeker mold. It's the most popular mold that they've ever done. Among them, and it's one of the most classic characters. So they're going to preserve that mold. It's an interesting like process of which ones they prioritize here for situations like that. Now, of course, we don't know for sure. You could speculate that the Hot Rod mold was done the exact same way because they've reissued that just about every time they've done a reissue line. Or the mold just might have really good survivability. We're not entirely sure. Another mold that's completely outside of the G1 spectrum here, but just to mention, there is another one that we do know 100% is a completely new mold, which was the reissue Rat Trap recently. We just kind of assumed they found the mold one day. No, they had to recast that, which is probably why it was so expensive for its size. But if they are working with what they have, that does explain how this is, number one, already a very Seeker-heavy line. There's already there's only 3 waves of this toy line, and they've already gone through some really weird choices. And by waves, I mean only 2 released at once. Wave 3 is just Perceptor, which is again an odd choice. It's a little bit weird. Now, he did have Spotlight in the movie, but Perceptor isn't exactly the most exciting of toys. It's kind of dull. We're gonna be honest. He turns into a microscope, so it's a little bit iffy. And of course, it's not the most screen accurate one, thanks to the changes in the face. So it's a weird one. It's a weird one to do for the '86 movie retro G1 reissue line, but it's a mold they had available. We saw in past, when they were doing the Walmart reissues, they actually did show a list of you could vote on which reissue we do, and Perceptor was on the list. He didn't get voted in, so I know Hasbro probably has data to say how high demand this toy is, but they might just be, I'm starting to think they might just be at a point where this is all that's left, which is kind of sad to think about. Let's take a look at the listing where Perceptor first showed up. And retro number 5 is Perceptor, so we have that. Retro 7 is listed as Shrapnel. Now, we also know that there is a Skywarp on the way, so they are completing the G1 anime reissues. So that's fine. So you have the trio at least. But Shrapnel's weird. Again, they're a minor point in the movie. It's odd because things like Cup did get reissued once upon a time, so you'd think Cup would be in line. He's a much bigger deal figure. But of course, this is something of a smokescreen, too. We're doing it based on the 86 movie line, so it looks and packs differently from the previous Walmart reissue line. Really, this is a venue for getting more popular G1 toys out, and then filling it up with ones that are just kind of like available at the time. So it's odd. And apparently we're getting individual Insecticons, which I don't think they've ever been done individually since G1. Every time I think about Insecticon reissues, whether it was the US commemorative ones that came out during Universe or Classics, I think, and the last time Takara did it, I can't remember if it was Encore or Collection, but I remember that being a 3-pack as well. It's weird to actually have the idea of like we're getting individual Insecticons. And I'm hoping they're not $35. They're probably going to be $35 a pop like Hound was. They probably are. It's like that. That's a lot for how little they do. But again, odd. So let's take a look at this. Let's do some deduction here, right? So what you see here is the listing for the collection line. So these were the original Takara reissue toy line for G1, and this is the what we call the book style packaging, where you can have them all lined up on a shelf in box with just the spine showing, and they all kind of lined up, and it looked like a set of books. So you can see a lot of familiar names: Maester, which is Jazz; Prowl, Skids somehow gets in there, but Trax, Smokescreen, Lambor, that's Sideswipe, Inferno, Starscream, Soundwave, Astro. You got a lot of heavy hitters here. You got a lot of really prominent ones. Now, there are some names missing, obviously. We'll get to that here in a bit. But you can see kind of where they were at this point. Consider this is this collection was 20 years ago. So at the time, these toys were, it's kind of surprising we had this many surviving. If we go to Encore, that doesn't quite fit. That does not quite fit. How do I get that out? Hang on a second. If we go to Encore and we see the list of names there, we see some of the more familiar ones. Soundwave and Starscream are there. Ironhide has made the cut, so did Ratchet. But if we look down the list, we're starting to notice that a few things have peeled off. We've gained Trailbreaker and Hoist, but we've lost Sideswipe. The Datsuns are not listed here. We've got Devastator. Devastator we've done. Skylynx, which is actually, I believe, the first time it was done in Japan, because they just found the mold from a company they just purchased. So we've got a few switch ups now. And I used to think that was just because they were trying to diversify the line a little bit and try to come up with different ones that they haven't done before. But it's starting to become more and more apparent that those molds just may not have been viable anymore. Because you would think Prowl's a pretty big deal G1 character. If Prowl was available, you'd think they'd do him every chance they get. We can go further. This was the Walmart reissue line, the vintage G1 before the retro line became a thing. And we got the mini bots. It's the usual crew of, actually not the usual crew, because it's all the season 3 remolds of the mini bots. But still, you can kind of get an idea of what we had to work with. Boxed figures, Hot Rod, Starscream, Devastator, Optimus. Okay, that's the cab-only version. Soundwave, Astro Train, Blaster, and that was it. That's as far as that line got, which is a little bit disappointing. It's a little bit disappointing, but it's still, you can still glean a few things from this. Yes, they hadn't done a Blaster reissue in America, so that gives you a variety. They had done Astro Train before as a Hasbro Toy Shop exclusive, which is basically just because they tried to put it out at Toys R Us and they didn't want it, so they had to get rid of it somehow. But it's mostly just the heavy hitters. We didn't really get any kind of outliers. We didn't get any kind of the mid-tier Autobots or Decepticons. And yeah, it just seems like every time we go through a reissue line, you can just tell when the list gets whittled down more and more. And obviously, we're taking a look at this list here of the ones that were just available a few years ago. And you can make the argument of, well, Hasbro's already reissued those. They're not going to reissue them too often. But I would also argue Soundwave. Soundwave will sell no matter what. Oh, and guess what? Astro Train, if there's ever a figure that needs to be done in the retro G1 style of the current reissues, it's Astro Train. Because it's a messed up figure who's never quite gotten the color palette he needs. Even the Japanese reissue that gave him the gray and purple weren't quite the right shades. He looked a little bit off. It could definitely be done better. And if that mold was available, 4 years ago, it should be available now. So what happened there? I mean, it's confusing. Now, it does seem like, as far as G1 reissues go, the pile is thinning, which means the molds are wearing out, and because the molds are so expensive to recast, they're not really looking at replacing them and reissuing these characters before. If we take a look at what happened with like the vintage G1, like Beast Wars, the vintage Beast Wars line, a lot of them ended up on clearance. So like, are you really going to like start reissuing a ton of toys for the sake of a line that ultimately just did not perform well? Reissues are kind of a mixed bag. There are fans who grew up with them and want them again, but those fans, unfortunately, they're hitting ages where they don't really have money to throw around like that as much as they used to. So, primitive toys aren't really going to like excite kids at the retailers. And the newer fans who got in with the movies, they don't care about the G1 reissues. They just don't. It also hurts that we don't have nearly as many as we should. So here's what I was talking about earlier. So these are the molds we know are lost. So all of the Dinobots are gone. We have not had them since Generation 2. This is where I would argue that at the very least, Grimlock, I would think would be a viable toy to make a brand new mold from. But again, that's a big ask, because I remember hearing that recasting a mold is more expensive than making a brand new one. I don't know why that is or how true that is, but that's what I kept hearing. It's also the reason we don't have a Mirage. And if we look down the list, we suspect that Sunstreaker and Prime's trailer are also lost. We know, G1 Shockwave, they are not allowed to use, but it is lost regardless. And then Wheeljack, we know his mold broke, which is why there's no reissues of Wheeljack either. You're talking about some pretty major characters here that are just not viable here. And then you've got situations like Ironhide and Ratchet, where if you reissued them, they would be laughed out of the store. So it is tricky. Like, it's getting thinner. And it has me worried. We're coming up with the 40th anniversary. And at some point we're going to be celebrating the big 50th anniversary of this toy line. You're going to want to be able to throw out a lot of those original stuff that all the fans were, that started the whole thing, because it's pretty huge. Pretty huge for a franchise like this, especially a toy line, to make it 50 years. That's going to be pretty incredible. So they're going to want to throw some huge things out for that. But at this rate, they might not have anything to throw. I'm really enjoying this reissue line, but it seems like it's going to be a struggle to actually fill it out. Now, you might have gotten some hope from this. There was a thing in a previous announcement that said that for the first time, for the 40th anniversary, companies are actually going to have scans of the G1 toys to be able to make their own versions. They clarified now that that is not exactly how it's going to go. They'll be able to make toys based on the G1 figures, but they will not be able to transform. So you're looking at action figures that are articulated but don't actually turn into the vehicle. You're making potentially statues that replicate the original look of the toys, or things like this. Now, I will admit, I have this Soundwave. It's pretty impressive. It looks like a tiny version of the original Soundwave toy. So good. You wouldn't think Hallmark, of all companies, would have like some really good sculptors out there, but hey, they did a pretty fantastic job, considering they apparently didn't have scans of the original toy like the companies are going to now. So we'll leave it at that. And then there's the other risk of the viability that I just mentioned. So when I got this reissue Hound that I'm showing off in this video, Yeah, it's already on sale. This is a brand new reissue, and I already got it for a sale price. Now, of course, this was the Power Days sale, which was site-wide, but there's no reason for them to throw that in and include it unless it wasn't going very well. And that seems to be the case for a lot of the reissue stuff. Like we said, most of the Beast Wars stuff ends up on clearance. Even Megatron and Optimus you could find on clearance. The Rat Trap you could eventually find for its original $5 price point from 1996. I know I've seen like Retrax who got down to like his original price point. That was deserved though. And I think the G1 line ends up in kind of the same department. I mean, I know that, like, I know of a few that have been ended up on clearance at some point, either on Hasbro Pulse or if you got lucky at Walmart. And it's one of the ones where I can always count on finding it. When the G1 Prime came out, we kind of laughed at it being $50 for just the cab. That thing sold out. That thing sold out everywhere. Like, that one went easily. I couldn't find it locally. But now, and I'd say the same thing about the Devastator. The Devastator sold really well. However, I can find these Starscreams just about any Walmart I go to right now. And I'm pretty sure the same is going to be true of Thundercracker once it's more available. So there's also this viability thing. Like, as we said, like, kids are not going to be interested in these G1 toys. It's mostly for collectors, and collectors are facing more important priorities when it comes to spending, B, a glut of products from the modern lines that they're already shilling out for, and C, just the fact that we're just burned out. A lot of us are just kind of burned out on G1, so why go back and buy the original G1 toys? I went back and got this because, well, frankly, with this deal and what else I bought on that sale, this is basically free. And I never played with a toy before, so I wanted to try it out. But for the most part, yeah, like, it's just more of what collectors are burned out on. It's probably not the best timing for this. So there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of factors that are making G1's reissue future a little bit frightening. We're running low on molds that we can use. Hasbro and Takara aren't willing to shell out the money, and that is because that collectors aren't willing to buy them. It's kind of tough, There's a time when we all got super excited for G1 reissues, and now it just kind of seems like a shelf filler. Even when they're doing something like this that's kind of inspired and different, it just still is disappointing. I wish they came up with this 20 years ago when we had a ton of molds to work with. Now it just seems like we're getting just whatever is left, by Hasbro's own words, just whatever they have available. And man, it's a little bit sad at this point. But that's just me rambling on about the state of G1 reissues. It used to be something we could count on every so often, and now it looks like we are hitting the end of the road. It wouldn't surprise me if G1 reissues as a whole line pretty much ended after this set, and then we just go to, like, maybe the 40th anniversary we'll see an Optimus Prime. Maybe for the 50th they'll reissue the original Optimus and Starscream or something. But that's probably going to be it. The days of the G1 reissue lines are probably coming to an end. So get them while you can, if they look interesting, because guess what? I don't think this is going to go much longer. But the daily videos will go longer, because I got some grinding to do. So thank you guys for watching. As always, I do appreciate all of the support and every one of you watching, subscribing, Patreoning, whatever you're doing. It is much appreciated. It helps me do everything that I can do for you guys. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time.
I'm like, I think you guys got this. I will back away, and I will see you all day.
You've got this handled.
Alaffi's like, really? You're not gonna help me? Like, it's fine now.
It's like these disgusting creatures breathing down my neck, and you're all just like, I believe in you. You got this.
All right, you seem to have this. 5 minutes.